In the small, sleepy village of Carrowmore, nestled deep within the rolling hills of Ireland, time moved like a gentle breeze. The villagers lived simple lives, tending to their sheep, working their modest plots of land, and occasionally gathering in the local pub for an evening of stories and laughter. The village had a reputation for its peace and tranquility, until one fateful day when a mysterious letter arrived at the doorstep of young Liam O'Connell. Liam was not one for drama or excitement. At 25, he had inherited little more than his father's small cottage and a handful of debts after his parents had passed away. His days were spent working as a labourer in the nearby town, and in the evenings, he tended to his garden and chickens. Life was predictable, and though he sometimes longed for adventure, he had never imagined that anything of interest would ever happen to him. That changed one autumn morning, as the leaves turned gold and red when the postman, a wiry old man named Sean, knocked on Liam's door. "Morning, lad," Sean greeted him, handing over a thick, yellowed envelope. "This one's for you." Liam frowned, examining the envelope. The paper felt heavy, and the wax seal bore an intricate crest he didn't recognise. His name, written in elegant cursive, was spelled out on the front. Liam O'Connell, Carrowmore. "Who's it from?" Liam asked, but Sean only shrugged. "Wouldn't know, but it came through the official post. Must be something important." Curiosity piqued, Liam took the letter inside. He sat by the hearth, a fire crackling in the small stone fireplace, and carefully opened the envelope. Inside, he found a letter written in the same elegant hand, but the words seemed to shimmer as he read them. "Dear Mr. O'Connell, it is with great urgency that we inform you of your inheritance. Upon the passing of your great-granduncle, Lord Alistair O'Connell, you have been named the sole beneficiary of his estate. As you are aware, Lord Alistair was the last residing member of the O'Connell family of Glenmorra Castle. You are hereby summoned to the reading of the will, which will take place at Glenmorra Castle on the first full moon of November. It is imperative that you attend. With utmost respect, Morrigan Darcy, solicitor of Glenmorra Estate." Liam blinked. Glenmorra Castle, Lord Alistair. He had never heard of such a place, let alone any granduncles who were lords. His family had always been poor. His father a simple farmer, his mother a kind woman who baked bread for the neighbours. There were no tales of nobility in his lineage, no whispers of forgotten estates or castles. The O'Connells were not aristocrats. They were country folk, through and through. He read the letter again, convinced it was some kind of joke, but the words remained the same. There was no explanation, no elaboration, just the mention of an estate and a castle he had never heard of. But curiosity gnawed at him. The first full moon of November was only 2 weeks away. With nothing to lose, and the hope that this might somehow be a windfall he desperately needed, Liam made up his mind to go. The journey to Glenmorra Castle took him through winding roads and misty valleys, far beyond the familiar hills of Carrowmore. As he travelled, the landscape grew wilder, the trees darker and more imposing. By the time he reached the edge of the estate, the sun was setting behind the mountains, casting an eerie glow over the crumbling stone walls that surrounded the castle grounds. Glenmorra Castle itself stood atop a rocky hill, its tall spires silhouetted against the twilight sky. The castle had clearly seen better days. Its once grand towers were weathered, and ivy crept up the walls like the fingers of some long-forgotten spirit. Yet, despite its decay, there was something regal about the place, a sense of ancient power that lingered in the air. Liam approached the heavy iron gates, where an old man in a butler's uniform stood waiting. "Mr. O'Connell, I presume?" the butler asked, his voice as old and creaky as the castle itself. "That's me," Liam replied, still not entirely sure what to expect. "Welcome to Glenmorra. The solicitor is waiting inside." The butler led Liam through the courtyard, past overgrown gardens and statues worn smooth by time. Inside, the castle was a labyrinth of dark corridors and grand halls, lit only by flickering candles. Dust hung in the air, and the distant sound of wind echoed through the stone chambers. Finally, they reached a large oak door. The butler opened it with a low creak, revealing a room lined with shelves of ancient books. At the far end of the room, a woman sat at a large wooden desk, her dark hair tied back in a tight bun. She looked up as they entered, her sharp eyes gleaming in the candlelight. "Mr. O'Connell," she said with a nod. "I am Morrigan Darcy. Please, have a seat." Liam sat down, the weight of the situation finally sinking in. He cleared his throat. "I'm not sure what's going on. I didn't even know I had a granduncle, let alone one who owned a castle." Morrigan smiled slightly, but it didn't reach her eyes. Lord Alistair O'Connell was a rather private man. He lived here in solitude for many years, and his estate has been largely forgotten by the outside world. But according to his will, you are the last remaining O'Connell heir, and thus, the castle and its lands are yours. Liam's mind raced. "So, I own this place now?" "In a manner of speaking," Morrigan said, her tone growing more serious. "There are certain conditions to the inheritance." "Conditions?" Liam asked, his curiosity giving way to a flicker of unease. "Yes," Morrigan said, standing and walking over to a large cabinet. She retrieved a scroll of parchment, bound with a black ribbon. Lord Alistair's will was not a simple matter. You see, Glenmorra Castle is no ordinary estate. It comes with a legacy that you must accept if you are to claim it as your own. Liam frowned. "What kind of legacy?" Morrigan hesitated for a moment, then unrolled the parchment. "The O'Connell family has long been the guardians of Glenmorra, a responsibility that stretches back centuries. This castle and the lands surrounding it are bound by an ancient pact, one that must be upheld by the family's heir." "What kind of pact?" Liam asked, his unease growing. Morrigan's gaze darkened. "The castle is protected by an old magic, one that was woven into its very stones long ago. But that magic comes with a price. Every generation, the O'Connell heir must make a choice: to accept the burden of the guardian or to forfeit the inheritance." Liam's head was spinning. "What does that mean? What kind of burden?" Morrigan set the parchment down on the desk. "To be the guardian of Glenmorra means more than just owning the castle. It means protecting the land from things that dwell in the shadows. Spirits, creatures, ancient forces that have long been tied to this place. The O'Connell family has always been the barrier between those forces and the rest of the world." Liam stared at her, struggling to comprehend what she was saying. "You're telling me I have to fight monsters?" Morrigan's expression was grave. "Not fight, necessarily. But you must keep them at bay. The magic of the castle will aid you, but it requires your presence, your will. If you abandon Glenmorra, the protections will fade, and the creatures will be free to roam." Liam's mouth went dry. "And if I refuse?" Morrigan's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then the castle will fall, and the forces within will be unleashed." For days, Liam grappled with the decision. He wandered the castle grounds, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. The villagers he met spoke in hushed tones about the O'Connell legacy, of the strange occurrences that had plagued the region for centuries: disappearances, mysterious lights in the forest, and eerie sounds that echoed through the hills at night. The more he learned, the more he realized that the stories were not just folklore. The castle had a life of its own, and its magic was ancient and dangerous. He could feel it in the air, in the way the shadows seemed to shift when he wasn't looking, in the whispers that crept through the halls at night. But the choice weighed heavily on him. If he accepted the inheritance, he would be bound to this place, to a life of solitude and danger. If he refused, he could return to his quiet life in Carrowmore, but he would forever carry the guilt of unleashing whatever dark forces lurked within the castle. As the night of the full moon approached, Liam stood on the castle's parapet, looking out over the misty valley below. The wind howled, and the moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. Morrigan joined him, her cloak billowing in the wind. "Have you made your decision?" she asked softly. Liam clenched his fists, his heart pounding. "I don't know if I'm ready. For this." "No one ever is," Morrigan said, "but the choice is yours." Liam stared out into the darkness, his mind racing. He thought of his quiet life, of the simple pleasures of tending his garden and raising his chickens. But he also thought of the legacy that had been thrust upon him, of the responsibility that came with it. Finally, he turned to Morrigan, his jaw set. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steady. "I'll take the inheritance." Morrigan nodded, her expression unreadable. "Then the castle is yours." As the full moon rose high in the sky, Liam stood in the heart of Glenmorra Castle, feeling the ancient magic stir around him. The air crackled with energy, and the shadows seemed to dance at the edges of his vision. But for the first time, he didn't feel afraid. The legacy of the O'Connell family was now his, and he would bear it with pride. For better or worse, he was the guardian of Glenmorra, and whatever lay in the shadows, he was ready to face it. The story of Liam O'Connell and his unexpected inheritance spread far and wide, becoming one of the great legends of Carrowmore. Villagers spoke in awe of the young man who had inherited a haunted castle and a dangerous legacy, and of the strange, magical things that sometimes happened in the hills around Glenmorra. And though the castle's secrets were many, one thing was clear. The O'Connell line was strong, and Glenmorra Castle was safe, for now.